who George Wallace was if they don't, who Sharon talks about as a hard right segregationist. So talk about that juxtaposition and what you had to see and what you saw and what that relationship was as your father talked about it to you between he and George Wallace, and how has that informed your work and moving forward?
Yeah, I think about it in two ways. The first is, if you think about anyone, again, to your point, that knows about George Wallace, knows, he was a segregationist, and kind of knows his tumultuous, if you will, history. And I think one of the things that I take from the story is that people can change, right? Hope, right? This idea that if you can take, in a world today that is hyperpolarized, right? I mean, everything these days are either you are pro something or you're against it. Like we don't live in this world anymore where there's a kind of an in between. It gives me great hope and belief that systems can change, that people can change. And if you think about the stories of so many of our students, I think our work, embedded in our work, is that kind of intrinsic hope that we can take these young people and their families that maybe aren't in the best conditions right now and are maybe struggling financially and with mental health and some of these other things, and really move them from point A to point B and give their children an opportunity to excel, not only academically, but in life. Because at the end of the day, this is really about, the life chances and how do we remove, again, the variables that we know impact student success, right? Like zip code and some of these things that should never, ever really, be in question in terms of being an impact. We know that is not the case. And I think the second thing that I really, kind of took away from that is really, just the idea of like policing, right? And if you think about, again, the current state, one of the things that is incredibly frustrating to me is kind of the binary nature in which we take this conversation, right? When it comes to policing, it's either it appears to be you're either pro Black Lives Matter or you're pro police. And I don't see those things as being mutually exclusive. I feel like you can be an advocate of Black Lives Matter and you can say definitively, like, hey, Black men and Black women should not be losing their lives at the hands of police officers, particularly unarmed Black men, which we've seen over and over again. But you can also at the same time say, but I am also pro-police. I understand the commitment and the sacrifice that people take and the oath that they take to protect and serve, and how challenging on a day-to-day basis that is. And I got a chance to see that personally. My initial kind of interactions with police were probably much more positive than maybe some Black men, given the fact that my father was a state trooper. Many of his friends, Black and white, Hispanic as well, were police officers, and they would come by the house. So that interaction with them really led me to have a strong affinity and an appreciation for police work. I've also been pulled over before and asked to get out of my car and stand behind my car for a registration sticker that was out. Right. So I also understand, the work that needs to be done and just kind of the overall way we as a country see Blackness. Right. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition, again, to your point, having lived that life with my father and he getting a chance to develop that relationship with George Wallace and then becoming friends later in Wallace's life. And just kind of the genuine turnaround. I would encourage folks, if you haven't, to read kind of the George Wallace story. And obviously you'll read about the piece where he was a segregationist, but there was some change there too towards the end. And whether it was just a change in rhetoric or a change in heart, we'll never know. But it was always friendly and seemed genuine to my father, even to the point where when he took his last breath, my father was the person he asked to be in the room at that time.
This is Deconstructing Dallas. We're talking with Adam Powell, President and CEO at Communities in School of the Dallas region. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about what Adam and his site coordinators are seeing on campuses, and just also about as we talked about a little earlier, the times that we're in as relates to race, diversity, and inclusion. So we'll be right back after this. Shawn Williams, Ryan Trimble, Deconstructing Dallas. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Deconstructing Dallas, Ryan Trimble, Shawn Williams. We are deep in conversation with the president and CEO of Communities and Schools of the Dallas region. He, of course, Adam Powell. Adam, we were talking about communities and schools and y'all's vision and how you really dig in and get into, trying to help these kiddos in our schools. One of the ways that I think is so unique and so critical is that CIS has site coordinators working on school campuses. They're building meaningful relationships with the students, being that support for these students. It's really critical to your work. What I wanted to know was, how has COVID impacted this piece of your business in your youth outreach, and how have y'all shifted over the past 7 months, and what changes are here to stay?
Yeah, over the last several years, we had already started to see kind of an uptick in mental health challenges with our students. And I think COVID has done a couple of things. I think one is it's really exacerbated that because now, you think of some of these students, the only meal they got right during the course of a day was at school, right? You got, students that were already struggling with, their peer relationships among several other things, but those kids are now isolated, right? So what's starting to happen is we're starting to see mental health challenges grow at an exponential rate, right? We're to the point now where nearly half, 47% is the number, but nearly half of the students that we served last year have identified as having some kind of mental health challenge, right? And that includes anxiety, depression, trauma, you name it, suicidal ideations. And again, that is all on the heels of COVID, and that's been, one of the major impacts that we've certainly seen over the last 6 or 7 months. I think the other thing that you're starting to see is the lack of basic resources. For so many students, you're dealing with parents now, right, that have lost their jobs, right, because they've been, either furloughed or laid off or whatever the case may have been through COVID. And then the question becomes, well, how are we going to pay rent this month, right? Or how are we going to where's the next meal going to come from? And that, kind of going back to what I alluded to earlier, the basic needs portion is a big part of what CIS Dallas region does. It's really about making sure, again, I go back to kind of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If those foundational elements aren't being met and fulfilled, the likelihood that any student is able to actualize his or her full potential is nil, right? So on so many levels, what COVID has done is really starting to put back into question just some of these access to some of these basic resources like food and healthcare and some of these things. So what we've really started to do is access our community of partners to really bring them into the table. I like to consider our site coordinators as quarterbacks, right? And what the quarterback's job is to know every student on the campus, every student that we're serving, and know specifically what their situation is, what their family situation looks like, and then put together a plan, if you will, to be able to tap into resources and really be able to mitigate some of those challenges. So it's their job to know all of the challenges that are going on with a student, to know who the folks are we can reach out to. Is it the food bank? Is it an organization like the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute? Is it some of these folks, right? What are some of the things we can tap into and really do, to really help change or alter the trajectory of these young people's academic careers?
Adam, you're into your second year now at CIS. Time flies when you're working hard. But we're interested in knowing a little bit more about your plans, how you see the future going to CIS, and what it is that you want to do.
Yeah. So, the year did fly by. I think, I don't even think I realized it until like 2 weeks after I hit the year mark, which I guess is a testament to, me kind of having my head down and just kind of working. But I think the biggest thing for us, and where I would love to see us be organizationally, is I don't want to see any student struggle academically because his or her mental health and basic needs aren't being met, period. This year, we're going to serve over 8,000 students. So that's, again, a grandiose kind of task, if you will. But at the end of the day, like, no student should struggle academically for those reasons. And in the world's greatest democracy, right? It's really appalling in some respects. If you think about the way low-income students of color are being treated in terms of just, again, lack of basic resources, a lack of mental health opportunities, a lack of just academic opportunities. And it's our job as an organization to remove all of those impediments. And at that point, if a student fails or succeeds, because we believe they all have the ability, obviously, to succeed, but it should be based on their intrinsic abilities and the effort that they put forth, and it should not be based on whether or not his or her, parent was able to sustain them during COVID, whether or not they had, healthy meals in the morning. It should not be based on whether or not their anxiety was properly treated. It should not be based on any of those things. And if we can get to that world where for every student in the Dallas region that is the case, then we will feel like we have actualized our mission.
Adam, since the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and we've seen a number of incidents that have sparked a lot of conversation around race, whether it be Breonna Taylor in Louisville, here in Dallas, Botham Jean, Tatiana Jefferson in Fort Worth. We've had a lot of conversations around race, equity, social justice. And so I'm just wondering, in your work, have you seen a difference in either the way people are talking about race in the work that you all do? And do you see an impact as it relates to race and social justice in the work that you all do?
I think the work that we do is intimately tied to social justice, because this is what it's all about, right? Again, I use this expression all the time. It's about democratizing, in this case, the educational process. And I think we see it within, policing and in other venues as well, is how do we make these systems more fair, more equitable to, in this case, young people of color, right? I think, one of the things that has come out of this is people are now starting to have meaningful, substantive conversation about race that is long overdue, conversations that we should have had, generations ago, and we're now starting to have them in a substantive way. Is one of the results, if you will, of kind of what we've seen in on the heels of George Floyd and all the others, unfortunately, that have occurred over the last, several months. I think in our work, we're starting to also hear from students, right? We talk a lot about mental health, and a lot of times we don't want to put those things together. People don't think about policing and mental health as things that are necessarily correlate. But what we're starting to see is there is trauma associated with this, and you guys know this as well as anybody. I mean, when every time you turn on your computer or you turn on your television and you see a person who looks like you, being killed, shot by a police officer, or you hear the story, of a young woman like sleeping in her own home being killed. That resonates with people. I mean, it resonates with young people, particularly people of color, because you look at those folks and I look at them and I say, that could have been my sister, that could have been my brother, that could have been my father, et cetera, et cetera. And that traumatizes, I think, young people in a way that there's probably not enough dialogue about that. And what we're trying to do at communities and schools is create these safe spaces in our offices, on our campuses, where students can come and they can talk to their psych coordinator and they can have these conversations, and we can really, again, begin to address some of these inequities on the micro level, but also when we think about policy at a macro level to really get us, this greatest democracy in the world, right, where we need to be.
Well, Adam, I know Shawn and I could sit here and talk to you for the rest of the afternoon, but we want to make sure that we let our listeners have a chance to find you and find out more about communities and schools. If they want to reach out, where can they find you, and where can they find more info about communities and schools?
We are all over. So our website is obviously CISDallas.org. We're also, from there, you can actually see our Twitter, our Facebook. We're all over social media. I am personally as well. Incredibly active on Facebook. Adam D. Powell. I can be found there, and look forward to hearing from some of your listeners.
Well, we really appreciate the time. We are really excited about working with you. Please let your staff, your team know that we are continuing to think about them, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, Ryan and Shawn, and I appreciate you guys having me on, and I have a tremendous respect for the work that you guys are doing, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This is Deconstructing Dallas. Shawn Williams, Ryan Trimble. We'll be right back right after this.
Welcome back. Deconstructing Dallas, Ryan Trimble, Shawn Williams. Shawn, awesome to visit with Adam today. He has great vision and is really dare I say, rolling up his sleeves,